do business with people they like. And so building those relationships and building a community feel where people feel, hey, I need some help.
Nothing beats getting in a room together and just throwing stuff up on a whiteboard and seeing what sticks and what slowly slides off as you investigate it further.
It's one thing to be able to say, hey, we know what the issues are. It's something entirely different to be able to say, and here's what the really smart CEOs are doing about it.
Welcome to The Mind Behind this week. One of the things that always stands out with everybody I chat with, everybody I interview, is something unusual. We get an unusual fact or statement that just kind of makes us think differently. Here's one that my today's guest, Brad Hauck, gave me. Between 85 and 90% of homes lost in Australian bushfires aren't destroyed by the fire front. They're taken by the embers. Now, the embers that travel kilometres ahead of the blaze, landing quietly on a roof, finding a gap, starting a fire inside the building before anyone sees the wall of flame coming. Now, Brad has spent 20 years as a volunteer firefighter. He's the officer in charge of a station on the Gold Coast, commanding 55 firefighters, and he's attended more than 200 bushfires. He knows exactly what an ember attack looks like. He also believes it's precisely what's happening to businesses right now with AI. Not the obvious fire on the horizon that everyone's watching, it's the quiet embers. They're landing in your inbox, your calendar, your CRM, while leaders are still in meetings deciding whether or not to have a policy about it. Now, Brad Hauck has spent 25 years in digital marketing. He's built and sold a successful SEO company. He's spoken at conferences in 54 countries. I was lucky enough to see him earlier on this year. He's an incredibly engaging speaker and knows what he's talking about when he talks about getting businesses to work with AI, to get it actually implemented, not just announced, not just workshopped once and forgotten about, but working. His message is simple. It comes straight from the fireground. No decision is much worse than having a bad decision. The fire doesn't wait. We need to take action. Let's hear what Brad's got to say.
Now, this is one I've been looking forward to. Welcome to The Mind Behind, and I'm genuinely delighted I got Brad Hauck with me today. Brad and I met just a few weeks ago at a convention, but there was just this you'll see just as we kind of go through this discussion that there was just this natural curiosity from me that there's a lot going on here. So I'm really looking forward to unpacking this. Good to see you, Brad.
Yeah, good to see you too, mate.
Right, for anybody who hasn't come across you, give us a little bit of background. How would you describe what you do and what you get involved with?
Okay, so what do? I work with companies to help them get AI implemented into their companies. And that works across a range of measures, whether it's strategic or actually hands-on training on how to use AI efficiently. So how to use Claude, ChatGPT, all those different models that we all talk about. But my background, I started out in tech back in, 1981. I think I worked into my first computer and then went into telecommunications and did my trade there, and then ended up in computer teaching, where I was a teacher for a few years, and then eventually started a search engine optimization company. And so I started selling online in 1996, selling books that I wrote for teachers. And from that, I kind of developed the skills of how to market online, and then companies, people I knew kind of came to me and said, oh, could you do that for us? And so I built a rather large SEO company, which eventually I sold. And then I've just continued on in that world, advising companies, working with them closely, working with business owners, and just helping them in the digital space. And of course, that's evolved into AI now, which I particularly love and enjoy playing with.
So we're kind of almost obviously going to get into the AI part as well. What do you do when you're not doing that?
So when I'm not doing that, I sleep and exercise. No. So I'm a volunteer firefighter. I have been for 20 years here in Australia. So I'm based in Queensland. So I've been a member of the Rural Fire Service Queensland for 20 years. And I'm actually the officer in charge of one of the stations currently. So I have 55 firefighters that I look after, and we deal 90% with bushfires, the nice big fires, and protect our community.
We're going to kind of look, because one of the things that really fascinated me, Brad, was that I saw a lot of connection between the two, and I know you do as well. And I came to Australia 5 years ago. and I kind of remember just before, I think about a year before I came, there was a lot of bushfires. There was a lot happening. Just before, I think just before COVID kicked in, actually. Um, and watching it from a distance is one thing. But when I do a lot of bushwalking, when you're out there and they're back burning, they're doing things, they're getting kind of ready for it, it becomes really real. Or you wake up in the morning, you can smell the smoke from 30 kilometers away. It's something. So it's really difficult to describe to people who have not been here. And I'm kind of seeing it. How does it actually feel when you're on that front line, when you're facing a bushfire? How does that kind of how does that shape how you approach things?
I think the key thing that I find, obviously, you're facing a big fire. The fire can be as small as 50 meters long to 5 kilometers, or to even bigger. I worked on a fire that was 74 kilometers from one end to the other. So the fires can be really big. So a lot of the work we do is very tactical. But you're working with your crews on the lowest level, right on the fire ground there, and the biggest thing I'd say is that you very quickly learn to deal with change, because when you're dealing with large-scale fires, especially bushfires, change in wind direction can change the whole fire. So from my perspective, I've always found, because I obviously worked with SEO, every day was something different from Google. Change has always been part of my life in a big way. And I found a lot of the skills that I was using on the fire ground, the leadership skills, were actually transferring over into business because of that change factor. And it's really, yeah, it's been a big part of what I do. Yeah.
And this is the point. I mean, I suppose I hear all these cheesy analogies all the time about AIs like this or change like that, but this is real life stuff. This is actually a way of thinking, and that's kind of what took me down this direction we were looking at. So you've got tactical, you've got things that are going on, but there's an overall strategy what you need to do with the fire, and then you've got all your people, and then you've got tactics, and then something changes. How do you manage that? How do you make decisions that quickly?
So there's a lot of factors running there. Sometimes it's about the systems that's in place. So we have certain systems of how we build up our people on the fire ground. Also, there's the experience and the training that you do. We do a lot of training so that people are prepared when they get on the fire ground, to the point where they don't need to think about the practical side of how to use a hose, how to use a truck. They can concentrate on their safety and looking at the fire and all that. And so you're kind of building these skills over time. So it plays into all of those aspects. So you're constantly looking around, you're constantly being aware of change and those sorts of things. And it's the same with AI. I mean, you've got to be aware of what's going on in the market. You need to be aware of the changes. I like to think of it as, with a bushfire, 85 to 90% of all houses that we lose in a bushfire happen because of embers flying through the air and landing on the house and lighting the house up. It's not to do with the fire front necessarily. And I see AI the same way. It's coming into businesses and people aren't really seeing it come in. So suddenly you've got AI in co-work, and then suddenly it's in Google, and suddenly it's here. It's like these little embers landing all around you. Meanwhile, you're like, I don't know what we're going to do with AI, but it's actually burning the house down around you.
It's, I mean, I was almost going to ask a silly question. I mean, what would you do if you didn't make a decision when you were on the front line in the fire? You got a serious problem. You got to do something.
Yeah, you've got to learn to make decisions. I read once that if you've got 70% of the information, you can actually make a good decision. And I think that's fair. You're combining elements. So you've got obviously your knowledge, your experience. I've got 20 years of fighting fires. I understand what fire is going to do in most cases. When I look at it, I look at the fuel, I look at the trees, those sorts of things. I can tell what's going to happen, and the weather. So then I take the information that comes back to me from my crews or from predictions, and I put all that together and make a decision. And I think that's probably the key thing, is that you have to come to a position where you're comfortable, what you're doing is going to be safe, and that you've got, things considered, like how do we get out of here if something goes wrong? So you've got your safety routes and things like that out. All of those elements, and then you make a decision and you go with it. But at all stages, I know working with fire crews, it's always about safety first. If the crews do not feel safe going into the fire, they have literal permission not to go in. It's their decision as the crew on the ground to say it's not safe, because they're right there. You might be on the other side of the fire. So there is this balance, but it's always safety first, because human life sits at the highest part of the decision-making chain.
And you've got to have that overall thing. That's kind of the vision, or that's a higher purpose, is to keep everybody safe. That's it,
Yeah,
number
we
one.
look at it as like
Yep.
people, property, environment, in
Yep.
that order. And it's really important that you remember that at all times, because, eventually the fire will be put out, eventually be caught. But, there can be losses along the way. But the one loss we don't want is humans.
That's really interesting. I don't know. I don't know if I've come up with this phrase or I've read it. I just feel there's like this corporate procrastination at the moment, this like fear of making a decision because things are moving so quickly. And that's where I see the direct link. If we don't make a decision, we're in a much worse place. We're letting things we're letting those embers kind of begin to take over, and we've now not got any control. Is that something you're seeing?
Yes, and I totally understand why, because things are changing
Yep.
so fast that people are scared to jump. But I think, as I said, with fire, you make decisions based on your experience and based on the information you're getting. But doesn't mean you can't change when you're in movement. You start down this path and you go, actually, look, that tactic's working to a certain degree, but we need to actually evolve that tactic. It's going to be the same with AI for certain businesses. Some businesses are going to, jump into the pool and they're going to go all in on AI, and others are going to put their toe in and do a little bit and build on that each time. And so it's really important that we do move forward. Again, that 70% of information make a good decision to move forward, but you don't have to go all in unless it's, maybe it's necessary in your case because, you can see the information. That if you don't go all in, you're all out.
It's really it's interesting you say that. I can't tell you how many groups I'm with. We're looking at leadership groups and how you make decisions, what you do. And I remember one time, it was probably 2 or 3 years ago, I threw in I threw in the phrase that you can't change it. If you make a decision and it's kind of not going the way you want, or you get more information, you can change it. And this was almost a revelation for the room. It
I
was
think
like,
that's a key
wow.
thing. Yeah, you're not going to get it right every time.
No.
As a leader, I know I'm not perfect. I'm just like everybody else. I'm going to make decisions, and sometimes they're going to be wrong.
Mhm.
But they're the best decision I can make at that time with the information I've got. And I need to remember that. And if I've got to apologize or I've got to change course, then that's what I've got to do. But the worst thing a leader can do is not make a decision. I can tell you now,
Yeah.
there is nothing more frustrating that someone can't make a decision, especially on the fire ground. But in business, it's even worse, because no decision is worse than a bad decision, in my opinion.
Yeah. It's and there's something that you mentioned earlier. You train, you learn how to use the hose and the truck. So we've got all the equipment. So in AI, we've got everything there. But just training, okay, that's how you use it, is not good enough. That's not enough.
No, one of the biggest problems I've seen, because obviously I've been in computer education for a long time, teaching teachers and teaching students and everything. One of the biggest problems I see in businesses is that they bring in new software, new tools, and they run an hour workshop and go, well, there you go and use it. And then they never come back to it. I mean, my guys train every Tuesday night. Even when there's no fires around, they're training every Tuesday night, and they're only volunteers. When you look at like a business, it's like, how can you give someone a software tool? Take ChatGPT. If you brought ChatGPT into your business in 2020, which is, roughly when I think I started playing with it, what it is now is not what it is then. So why wouldn't you keep training your people as it evolves? You should be saying it can now do this, spend an hour doing that. A lot of businesses drop the ball when it comes to training. They just expect people to pick things up by osmosis.
Sorry, did you say 2020? Because if I remember rightly,
Yeah, I think it was
the
2020 I
big
started
moment was
playing.
2022, I think.
Yeah, I think I remember
Was the big
playing with
moment.
it during COVID. Maybe I'm wrong, but I mean,
Really?
it's a lifetime ago.
Wow.
Uh,
Okay, you.
yeah, I'm a very early adopter. Always
Nice.
have been, because it's just my nature. I like to play with things. So
we were looking at some statistics the other day, just looking at what the AI adoption is, and is for something that takes over so many conversations within business, the adoption is tiny at the moment. It is absolutely minuscule that people are using it, and it's really tiny how many are actually using it deliberately, with a purpose
there's
behind it.
probably, I think OpenAI put out a study and they said something like, 70% of stuff was just personal use.
Yeah.
Hmm.
What do we think? Is it because it's too big a decision at the moment? I mean, I've got this conflict in my head about why companies aren't doing it. I think to actually make a decision, we're going with this platform or this LLM, and we're going with this thing when it's changing so quickly. I get why people would hold back and kind of like wait, almost like COVID. We'll wait till next month, it will change. And next month it will change. We're looking for something external to kind of give us a little bit of comfort on this. I'm conflicted if it's too big, or if just the rate of change is too much that it's overwhelming. I'm kind of between the two.
I think it's a combination of things. Obviously, if you look at the main LLMs, so just say Gemini, OpenAI, so ChatGPT and Claude, just take those three. I mean, every month they come out with an update, and suddenly it seems like, well, now ChatGPT is better at that, so we should be using that. Oh, now Claude's better at that. Now Gemini's better at that. So you get pulled between these poles. In the end, I think the key thing is you choose a major player, and that you stick with the major player and get to know the tool. One of the biggest pieces of advice I give people is to actually get in and learn the whole tool. We often scrape the surface of a piece of software, especially something like an LLM, because we're just using it to ask questions. And yet, we could go into scheduled tasks or skills or, all the different elements that are there. And I think the other thing is too, everyone's scared to jump in and invest a lot of money because they're afraid that that company is going to go out of business, because so many of them, they're spending large amounts of money, billions of dollars, really just to get users. They're not necessarily making any money. Certainly, I know, OpenAI is not making money. So there's those elements come into it. I've heard, Sam Altman say he's worried about Google because Google in the end is the big kahuna, and they have real money behind them because it's their own money. And so, we could go through all of this, and then Google could just come in and go squish.
We've actually had the same conversation internally. Which ones are going to be the most stable, which have got kind of everything around it. Somebody like Google. I mean, I know Microsoft trying to do this with Copilot and trying to pull kind of all the things in together. It just feels like Google's there. I'll be really, and I'm not advocating any of them. We just made a decision the other month that we've gone down a particular route with two LLMs and said, well, even if something overtakes it, it'll be short term. So kind of go down, invest, understand it, and know what it can do.
I think the key there is that the skills you learn can be applied across the different models. And that's the most important part for a business, is that you're teaching people the skills that then they can take, prompting skills, for example, is one of those. Take that and put it on any model. That's where you should be focusing more than which model. Look at what the underlying skills are.
Now, this isn't for everyone. I get it. With obviously with us, Brad, you and I being such youngsters here,
Yes.
we take on technology naturally. It's just part of our lives. People at different stages of their careers and that kind of stuff. But it's just integrated with the business. How do we get people just to naturally use this? And I don't think I've seen anything that's had such a fear attached to it. I would say probably more than half the conversations I have is like, oh no, AI will do this or it will know this. And there seems to be this kind of hesitance from a really large group. So how do we get people kind of using that truck, using that hose in the right way, and not being scared of it?
I think the key is to start off with something simple. So, one of my favorite things is to teach people to use scheduled tasks in Claude, because you can start out with something simple, such as, check my email, and if there's any messages from someone who I've written back to before, draft a reply. It's simple. It's not sending anything. It's just checking and it's writing something. Or it could be, check my LinkedIn and see if anyone sent some messages to me and send me a Slack message. But those little tiny scheduled tasks, or those little tiny tasks that you do on a daily basis that you repeat over and over, that could lend themselves to being done by an AI, I think is the place to start. Obviously, we got write an article, do a script, create a picture. Those sorts of things are pretty common. But I think the real step is down the next the next step is to go down into having tasks that are automated and have agents look at them. But start out with something that you do every single day that's repetitive.
But Brad, that means I need to give it access to all my information, and it'll know everything about me then. Is that not
So
scary?
that's an interesting question. Yeah, like I love that one. So I came across this video and I was watching, the guy was saying, I'm using OpenClaw and I love OpenClaw and, but I don't want to give it access to my passwords. And I thought, you know what, you're right, because I tried OpenClaw and it's scary clever, and it's not something I would recommend anybody jump on unless they've got a bit of technical knowledge, to be honest. But what the suggestion was, and what I've applied, is that I use make.com for connecting things. I originally started out with them making automations, so step-by-step automations. But within Make, I can connect all my tools. So I can connect my Facebook account, my X account, and all those. So using a webhook, I can actually hook Claude, tell it to go to the webhook, and then Make keeps all my stuff private. And it's a much more stable sort of environment to keep it away from the LLM, because the LLM never talks to my actual logins. It goes and talks to a webhook, which is just a pass through. So there's things you can do to protect yourself. It's about maybe doing just that little bit more research and say, how can I do this without giving my personal details to them?
How would people know to do this? I suppose that's the big question. It makes absolute sense. And we'll put,
Yeah.
did you say make, make.com?
Yeah, make.com. Yeah. So make is like Zapier, same sort of company. Been around quite a long time. Used to be Integramat, if I remember correctly. And they've got a great university there to learn how to do it and all that. It's a really good tool. I highly recommend if you're looking to do some controlled automations. It's a great place to start. I think the way to learn is pretty simple, and that is that I tend to Google the problem first and go and read what it comes back with. I mean, I really do start with Google, like most people, even though I've got a huge technical knowledge. It's a good place to start. Second place is actually YouTube. YouTube is very good to help you solve problems. Now, it's not always as easy to find a problem. And the other thing is actually you can ask the LLMs and they will tell you the best way to do something. And my favorite is I'll actually pit one against the other. So I'll ask Gemini how to do it in Claude, that sort of thing. I will often use one AI to prompt a different AI to get the result I'm after. And so there's multiple ways to do it, but sometimes it's as important to just sit there and work your way through the problem. Often people are in a hurry, like we've got to do this, and they sit down and they don't really achieve anything. Where if they'd sat down for an hour, worked their way through a tutorial, and then done it, it's amazing what you can achieve if you just put a little bit of time aside to do some training yourself. There's a lot to be said for actually sitting still for a little while.
But again, we're doing a webinar the other week, and one of the pushbacks on AI and AI implementation was everybody thinks it saves time, but it doesn't up front, because we've got to put some time into it. So it might actually be slower. Or it might take not necessarily slower, but it might take a little bit more time till we understand it. And it wasn't until I kind of spoke with someone about how do you develop staff? You've got to put, we've got to trust that things are going to happen. It's going to take, they're maybe not going to be able to do it as quickly as we can up front.
Exactly.
It takes that time.
I always try to make this point to people. Your AI is like a staff member. if you hired someone to come into your office and write newsletters, and I once did this, used to work for associateprograms.com, and the owner of Associate Programs used to be a newspaper editor. So he was pretty harsh when it came to writing. I learned a lot. And, I'd write an article, then he would edit it and then send it back to me, and, so on and so forth. It's the same process with AI. If you bring someone into your office, you get them to write something, and then you look at it, you edit it, and you send it back to them, where you say, no, look, this bit, we don't want this bit, we want to put this bit in, and you send them back. And so you train them. Well, it's the same with AI. If you get it to write an article, you then manually edit the article, feed it back into the AI and say, I have edited this. Tell me what I've done. Now update, your system, and so on. And so over time, you might have a project folder full of articles you've written that it can then refer to. So it's just like creating the human brain. We're creating that experience in someone. We have to do it with the AI as well. You've really got to do it, and it's worthwhile too, because the cost up front more than pays for itself in the savings and time at the end.
Absolutely. What will it not be able to do, do you think? And I know we're all kind of really speculating on this because it's moved so quickly in the last kind of 3 years to places that we probably didn't expect or wasn't necessarily predicted by most. Where do you think it can't be used or it would struggle?
I think it doesn't work well for human interaction, realistically. So dealing with humans. Yes, I've had those chats with it where you kind of think, wow, it's really clever. That's great advice. And then it gaslights you. But, you've got to be careful. I think that's where the biggest thing is human on human contact. When I look at industries, and I've been through this, existential crisis being someone who's in marketing. AI is eating marketing alive. Oh, what's going to happen? Last night the statement was made that 600,000 jobs out of 40 million jobs in Australia would disappear thanks to AI. May or may not be true. I think it'll, like any industry, when I started out in, tech, they said this would destroy industry. In fact, all the jobs I've had since I started in tech didn't exist until the tech came along. So, but I think the human interaction side is probably a key area that will always be protected from AI. I think AI is only as good as its input. Again, I think Richard Dawkins came out recently and kind of said that AI is only a sum of what it knows. It's not actually learning. It's only taking what it's learned and applying it based on the questions you're giving it. And I think that's an interesting point of view. But yeah, I think it'll be involved in every area of your life in some way. But whether that's necessary, that could be the real question. Like, do you need AI in your fridge? Well, no. I mean, it's like having a TV screen on your fridge. Do you really need a TV screen on your fridge? Well, it's cool. I'd like it, but I'm not paying an extra $3,000 for it. It's a fridge. I can open it up and see what's in there. I don't care if, I've forgotten to get milk because it didn't send me a message. So, there's that balance.
Yeah, we've got to take some kind of responsibility here, haven't we? I interviewed Hugh Jeffcott from Endava quite recently. He's very much at the forefront of this, very keen to kind of develop things. I think he's got something like 30 agents working for him. I'm like, that's really cool. And it was quite interesting when we talk about agenting, we talk about creating the agents. I had this kind of false pretense that you get an agent that will take over someone. And it's not, an agent will take over a task, will do something. And the 30 agents that he's got there are kind of doing different parts of what a human would do, not just kind of replacing someone. So I think my question to him was, do you need leadership skills to deal with agents? And his instinctive response was yes, absolutely. We actually need to bring that element, that human element, to AI for it to learn. What's your thoughts on that?
I think it's an interesting one because, there's often, see the layouts for N8N and things like that. And you'll have like a master agent that controls the sub-agents sort of thing. And I do see that a control agent, a leader, is certainly one aspect of having, agents work. But I think agents and all of those sorts of things are great. But when I've watched people try to apply that stuff in their businesses, it lends itself to certain tasks and not others. So take phone answering, for example. We're seeing a lot of agents where people can ring in, they get answered by a voice agent, it puts it into the calendar, it does the booking for the restaurant or whatever, you know. That's an area I think lends itself to AI. But there's other areas where I don't think it fits at all, such as, you know, sitting in a room analyzing someone or analyzing something specifically. Yes, you could apply AI to it, but is it really the best use of AI or your time to do it? And I think we're going to find that certain industries will apply it in certain areas of their businesses, but not all areas. And a lot of the people who are using a lot of agents are often people who are working on their own or working in the area of AI or something like that. You know, you tend to find that they're big for it because it actually works in the area they're in. But put it into a hospital, no go, you know.
So I think, I mean, what I'm hearing is we don't need to go all in, and we don't do nothing. There's this middle ground that we can just kind of play around with it and try it.
Yeah, as I said, just start by those little repetitive tasks. And that's a really good place to start with agents, for example. So that's what I like to do. And that's what I recommend for people because it's not too scary if you start there. And then once you get comfortable with that, then you go, well, what if I got it to do this as well? Or what if I get it to do another step? You know, so kind of step, 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 add another step, add another step.
Kind of final part, and I'm just one of the things I have heard a lot in is about how do we control how people use AI. So what I've seen a little bit is, especially when it's maybe legal documentation or reports or recommendations, whether it's in construction or project management or engineering or something like that, that people, we've got employees that are looking for a shortcut at times. You know, create this report for me. Here's all the information, just do it and then submit it. I'm just curious, what have you got any thoughts about how either a business does that or how we maybe even need to do that as a in a higher level? How do we put kind of policy restrictions around things or best use or is that gone? Is kind of is it out there now?
No, I think it's really important actually. I've noticed lately I've seen this word guardrails come up when it comes to AIs. And I think it's actually worth mentioning that we can set guardrails of what it can do and can't do, depending on how you develop your LLM or your agents. But also, in a business perspective, again, this comes back to training realistically. You need to say to your people, this can't happen. For example, in the early days, we talked about AIs going offshore, so using DeepSeek, putting our information into China, for example. Some companies have come out, whether they be military contractors, government organizations, whatever, and said, no, you can't, just for, you know, national security reasons or whatever other reasons they gave. And that's something to be really aware of because I know of companies who were using AI and then the person they were doing the work for found out they were using AI and of course they got clipped because they were actually taking, you know, private information and almost making it public in a way. And I think that's the important thing is understanding every business is different and you need to sit down and have a very serious think about what can we do? What should we do? What permissions do we need before we do it? Do we need to get the client to sign a permission form? Where is that information going? And like, I mean, truly, where is that information going? Because you'll often see companies that say, oh, we've got this great program. And so you implement it because it's part of your system. But what you don't realize is that even though you've been using that software for a while, they're actually using a different LLM to run the AI. You're just not seeing it. It's packaged up. So in fact, your information is not going to them, it's going to them and them. So yeah, very much one of those conversations that I think all businesses should be having and should be very seriously considering, especially if they have private information, which most companies do.
Right, you know tech, I don't. So this is just between us, okay? Nobody else. I won't tell anyone else. Have we ever really known where our information's going? When we use a software platform, we use a SaaS or something like that, have we ever actually really had control of it?
I think it depends on you. Some companies do their due diligence. So, for example, most government organizations use Microsoft tools because there is a level of due diligence there. They
Yep.
know where it's going, they know where it's hosted, they know where it's sitting, all of those things. And that's one of the reasons why they go with it, is because of that sort of package. On the other hand, smaller businesses obviously will, change tools from time to time, and they don't check. And it is a mistake because you could find yourself in a situation where you're legally compromised.
Yep. So it's not really any different. We just need to do our homework. We need to understand where things are going.
Yeah, we're
Um,
human. We tend to cut corners and think, oh no, it's okay. And I agree with you. We've all done it. I certainly have done it. But you've got to realize that it might not be okay. So be very careful what you're doing.
yeah, it's I've got one of these password managers
Me
where
too.
I've got everything in there, and I think, oh, that's great. It's everything's in one place and it's nice and secure. What if? It's just, I mean, properly vulnerable, but we make trust points, and I suppose that's where a lot of people need to get to with AI. Just
Yeah,
kind of
I think so.
do. Um, if you were to, I don't know why I'm saying if you were to, because you do. If you and when you're advising businesses, when you're
Mm.
advising CEOs on like where do we start, how do we look at this, rather than have that kind of wait and see um, viewpoint. We need to actually do something. Where do we start doing something? What's the kind of the first things? How do you do that?
I think the most important thing is that I sit down with people and I actually talk about their business and find out, as I said, where the problems lie, where they think they can apply AI, where they think it'd be most useful, where it's already appearing in software that they're using. So whether it needs to be turned off. So for example, Copilot, maybe you go into the administration panel at Microsoft and turn it off for all employees or something like that. So I want to understand what they're already doing and what they're comfortable doing, but then also look at what they're trying to achieve. And that's probably the most important thing. Is like, it's great to say we want to use AI, but you came back to the thing before, is it actually going to save us time and money? Well, if it's not, why bother? Or if it's one of those things that we don't need it right now, but we can see down the track there's a saving there. So we need to start, testing and planning and things like that. And that's important too. So understanding the business is always where I start. It is the most important thing to understand what they do, how they do it, what software they use, what are their people like doing, even interviewing the people in the company to get an understanding of where they're using
Yeah,
AI and not telling anyone, which also happens. They're doing it
absolutely.
on their private laptops,
Yeah,
at home and all that sort of stuff. So there's that is the key thing, is understanding where they're really at and where they want to go.
How does a company deal with that? Because that's one of the things when I was mentioning project management or some legal things. I have seen that as well, where people are just using their own LLM. They've not even got a paid subscription. It's not even covered. It's not protected in any way, but is doing some of the work for them. How do we deal with that in a business, or don't we?
Well, I think again comes back to that setting the standards. You've got expectations of your staff. If everyone's starting to use it, then you seriously need to consider whether you need to supply it. If they're going to be using the free one, would it not be better to invest the money to get the protected one? I think that's the thing, is understanding where you're at. And as you said, people are just using it anyway. I mean, I've seen the situation where, the Queensland government came out and said, you can't use any LLM to do any work. And then they supplied their own AI that people could use. And that makes sense, because rather than just saying you can't use it, they said you can't use any other, but here's one we will let you use. So they set it up better. And that makes sense to me, because at least then there's some level of control of what's going on. You can see what's happening. You get all the data as well. So yeah, but yeah, companies have really got to look at it in that you're right. People are going to be at home doing their work on their own machine so that you can't track it, and then putting it back in.
My take on this, you've got much more experience than I do in this, Brad. My take on this is I use two as well. I get them to argue with each other. I argue with it. It's great fun. If I'm sitting bored, I'll come up with a topic. I think it was Gemini last week said, "Do you want a heated discussion, Graham?" I'm like, "This could be interesting," and kind of. So it's really interesting just getting seeing how it can pivot. Um, we would never. You mentioned Google earlier. I don't know this old-fashioned thing called Google. Um, we would never just take an answer out of Google with blind faith. We would check it. We'd kind of have a look at it. You look at reviews, you look at whatever it is, if you're shopping or whatever. We never just take that as, well, that must be the answer. And I think that's the attitude here.
Yeah, it's a good point. I did my master's thesis on how students research online. So this is going
Ah,
back
right,
quite a few
okay.
years when the internet first started. We were
Yeah.
looking at that. And yeah, the study basically came back and went, they took the first answer. They didn't do any cross-referencing, which of course is a skill that every student gets taught. And certainly at universities, you cross-reference all your information, you compare data sources and all that. But I look at what people do now and I see that that study still stands strong. Even today, people take the first answer and they're not doing that cross-referencing. And we've seen this with, fake news and deep fakes and all that sort of stuff coming through, the fake advertising. Again, it's not cross-referencing things. People are not kind of going, well, is this actually true before they press the buy button? Those sorts of elements. And I think it's really important that you understand more than ever that you need to find your points of truth. So whether that be Wikipedia as a starting point, as a partial point of truth, or somewhere that you can at least start to cross-reference your content, but don't take the first answer as being correct. I mean, we've all seen your LLMs doing hallucinations and telling you something, and then you go, "That's not true," and then it goes, "Oh, yes, you're right. That isn't true." It's like, why did I pay for those tokens?
I know I've mentioned the story a couple of times. I was interviewing Ted Miller about just over a year ago, an ex-government barrister. We're looking at AI in law at that time, and he's very much on it. And he told me about the case of Avianca and Mata, which was one of the first, kind of the biggest hallucinations, where there was this legal case in the Southern District of New York. One lawyer went, "I'll find some precedents for this," came up with a whole load of precedents and gave it to the judge, and the judge went, "None of them are real. It was a hallucination." So before I was interviewing Ted, I did a bit of research, and I thought like that. So I did a bit of research in Google. Then I went onto ChatGPT. I've got all my information. I'm good to go. And my final question was it you that gave the wrong information? And ChatGPT said yes. I had the next 30 minutes I had arguing with ChatGPT about what the consequences should have been for them. It's kind of it's one of those things. I don't know. Maybe we're a bit outliers here, Brad. That we want to check things. I'm kind of old school, where I used to sit with two newspapers with opposing views and read the same stories in two different. I needed to know what someone else was thinking. I couldn't just take kind of one opinion of it. So that used to be my Sunday, reading two almost conflicting broadsheets on the same stories and just seeing where they were coming in. God, are those days when I had a newspaper.
It's so strange, this comparing, data sources is probably the best way
Yeah,
to put it. But you really do need your North Stars. You need those places. So, for example, Snopes.com to check whether
yeah,
something really happened, or
yeah.
Skeptoid.com, same sort of thing. Go back and look at the research background to it. Wikipedia, your reliable news organizations. All of those things, you do need to look at those as well. You can't just take an AI's word for it.
I think Snopes was one of the first that I came across years ago. Super. And again, I hear all the time, never use Wikipedia because it's wrong. Well, you can use Wikipedia as a starting point. There's nothing wrong. There's nothing wrong with getting an understanding. Yeah. Um, I'm going to do an unashamed plug. I've got your book. Yeah. There you go. I'll do it because you're not going to do it. You've got your book, Run Towards the Flames, and I'm kind of looking at what's going to happen in the next 5 years, and I'm going to guess none of us can predict it. I'm curious about opinions. What do we need to run towards in the next 5 years? What do we think is going to be happening? Just in Brad's view.
I think AI is going to become more of a problem, as in it's going to be everywhere. You're not going to be able to escape it. I think that's definitely one that you've got to embrace. You can't walk away from it. It's going to interfere with your business in some way or another. That's probably a big one. Second one, I think, is one we're seeing at the moment where the world is just changing really fast. A lot of people losing heart and, feeling the weight of the world. I think there's going to be a lot of effect. I think the world changed after COVID and it hasn't come back. It is not the same world, and I don't think it's necessarily got any better for a lot of businesses. So that's one I've seen personally with companies that I've worked with, is that they were changed forever. And I think that that will set a precedence for people to make them uncomfortable from now on. I think everybody is going to be sitting on the edge of their seat from now on. I mean, we've just had the situation with the, Strait of Hormuz affecting global supply chains, for example. It's the same feeling that we had in COVID, people panic buying, people doing all these things. I think we're going to see that continue. I don't think that's going away anytime soon. And I think that's going to affect business. So I think businesses that work with people are going to do really well. In that field, they're really going to take off.
It's even more so then that we need to look after our people. We need to, because dealing with that uncertainty is the biggest part of change, regardless of anything else. It's that uncertainty piece that's going to knock any productivity and any interaction that we've got. Just kind of funny. What do you say? I'm in agreement that I don't think the world has come back after COVID. I think there's been that. What shift do you think kind of happened that's never corrected itself or has kind of moved on from it?
I think that a lot of companies downsized during COVID, and a lot of businesses downsized, and also they pulled a lot of budget out of things. So one area I saw people pull budget out of is out of education. So companies that actually used to produce educational materials suddenly pulled all their budget out of producing educational materials, for example. On the other side, businesses that used to have 10 staff now have 5 staff, and they're not game to bring on 10 staff. They're fighting to stay alive with 5 staff. There's just this, there was all this downsizing happen, and it hasn't come back. You've only got to go to the city centres to see it. People do not want to go into an office. They do not want to be around other people. They're still afraid of catching COVID or something else that's going to make them sick, along with probably a dozen other reasons. But even the nature of work, the younger generations coming through, I'm seeing them, they're not big on necessarily personal contact. They're very much on don't ring me, send me a message, for example. But even how they approach things is entirely different. So I think the whole nature of work is changing. I think we're going to, my personal thoughts, so this is going out on a limb here. I think we're heading back towards, the 16th century where, you had the butcher, the baker, the candlestick maker, and then their son became the butcher, the baker, the candlestick maker. Well, I think we're going to see more of that micro business stuff where everybody's working for themselves. Now, part of that might be because I'm on the Gold Coast here, and really, I always say it's like the small business capital of the world. Everyone works for themselves here. But I really do believe that there will be lots more micro businesses rather than large corporate businesses. They'll still be there, but the majority of people, rather than working for someone else, will be doing jobs for themselves.
And do you think that will bring us back to more local communities, or will we be working for ourselves in a kind of in a wider environment?
I think it'll bring us back to our local communities in a lot of cases. If you have a look at like the Facebook groups and things like that, you'll notice there's lots of people saying, I fix fences, I clean roofs, I do path cleaning. And they're advertising through these community groups, and they're getting plenty of work and they're keeping busy. And the local community then passes them on to the next person, because we all live on referrals. I do it myself. I need an electrician. I ask the guys down the station, anyone know a good electrician? Straight away, a good name comes up. I use that electrician. I'm happy. I pass it on. I think, what I'm seeing is a lot more of that.
That's going to be interesting. Before it's interesting you mentioned this because before COVID, belonging and community was a big thing. For 5 or 6 years, that we're moving towards. That's how companies like WeWork and everything came up. Where you took individuals, kind of tried to get them into community, regardless of kind of where that business went. The thought process behind it, and I worked very, very closely with them when I was in New York. Was a phenomenal concept, and it kind of went. But in the last 12 months, we're beginning to hear people thinking about how do we become part of something? How do we get a belonging? Stephen Bartlett, the Diary of a CEO, he said when he does live work, he said one of the most regular questions he gets is how do I connect with people? How do I find friends? How do I from kind of the younger generation? So it's interesting you say that we might be going back into a community base, which I think would be phenomenal.
Well, I think the difference I'm seeing, but is that it's not necessarily community face to face.
No, it
It's
doesn't need to be.
community through Facebook groups and
Yeah.
WhatsApp groups and things like that. So it's a virtual connection with real world sales on the back or real world work on the back. And I think that's the difference. When you try and get people together in a room, it's much harder. So changing, but some similar, you know.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm a great optimist that once we've got that kind of that one thing, you live in that area or you're familiar with that street where all the businesses are, people might just begin to kind of open the doors or the curtains.
You know, I'm a really strong believer in business networking. I really believe that going into a room with other people or chamber of commerce or whatever, and just getting to know those people, you know, not selling, but just getting to know them. And over time, when they need someone, they'll come to you because they trust you and know you. I really, truly believe in that model. I think it's extremely powerful. And I highly recommend it to anyone I'm advising, you know, people starting out in agencies and businesses to get out and network. Because the online world's a really hard place to actually find leads. No matter what you see, no matter what all the TikTok reels and everything tell you, realistically, it's very hard to pull leads that way. Face to face with someone's much easier because there's a level of trust that's made.
Build a network. It's kind of how everything's always worked. Just build a network of good people. Once we've done that, things happen. Brad, final thoughts. Somebody's sitting there thinking, this is really interesting. What should I do next? I've got a business. I'm now interested in the technology. I'm a little bit curious about it. What would you advise?
Look, I think one of the key things is to start looking at, as I said, those little things that you could change using AI. That'd be the first thing. Second thing is, you know, if you're looking for training, I can obviously help you with that. But I think it's important that you do move forward, that you do start to take steps. You don't have to take big steps, please. Just take little steps. You know, that old inch by inch really, really means something to me. But, you know, go and have a look at a few options. Go and watch some YouTube videos and see what people are doing. And then look at what you need to achieve and go, well, I think that's a place I can start. You know, you've really got to take a little bit of time to yourself. You know, as a leader, we must continue to grow. It's really important. In fact, I just did an episode on my Leadership in the Line of Fire podcast on this fact that leaders need to grow. We often train our people, we forget to do stuff ourselves. And that's really, really important that you put time aside. You can't just make decisions on what everybody else is telling you.
Brad, I absolutely love the conversation. I knew right away within 2 minutes of speaking to you that we would probably do something like this almost for an hour. Thank you so much for coming. We'll put all your details into the in below with this podcast so everybody can get to. But just in case they can't read it, what's the best way of contacting you?
Easy way is just bradhauck.com. Just look me up. I'm easy enough to find. If you search for firefighter and AI, I'm pretty sure I'll turn up pretty quickly.
What, there's not a lot of you? Have we got a
No, there
unique
doesn't seem to be too many, although there is a lot of Haucks in the world, I found out. Not many in Australia, but the rest of the world, there's lots of them.
Nice.
But I'll turn up. You'll find me.
Cool. And Leadership in the Line of Fire, the podcast.
Yeah, Leadership in the Line of Fire. It's a podcast I do. I kind of take a firefighter's perspective and combine it with business to talk about different leadership topics. So sometimes I'm bringing some fire stories in and, you know, it's a bit of a mixture, but it's good fun and you'll learn something.
Brad, I am going to guess with the way technology is going, we're going to speak again.
Well, I hope
Thanks so
so.
much for your
I had a
time.
great time.
Likewise. Take care. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.